What would your biggest criticism of recognized religion be?
A fascinating question. I would say my biggest point of contention with the recognized religions are its tendency to fall into what I would describe as philosophical suicide. That is, to abandon and to forsake reason in exchange for mere comfortability. So I believe in the absence of intrinsic meaning to life. I believe that, I'm a deist as well, so I believe that God created and then left. The two coincide and in fact work amazingly together. So yeah, my biggest criticism is the fact that people typically abandon reason for something that's more comfortable. It is more comfortable to live with an idea that we're doing this for a purpose. We wake up every morning, we eat, we brush our teeth, we kiss our loved ones, we hug our loved ones, we go to school, we go to work for a purpose. You know, these menial, somewhat tedious activities have an eternal or at least an intrinsic purpose. It is so much easier to believe that than to say, I might not be enjoying work, I'm not, feeling fulfilled, and it's all pointless. I'm just doing this because it would take far too much. It would take a lot more courage to, kill myself. However, my philosophy, in fact, has actually led me to believe that it takes far more courage to live than it does to die. But yeah, so my main criticism is that, you abandon reason. I do believe that, every single person at one stage in their life looks around, maybe it's when a family member dies, or, as Sisyphus does, you're rolling the same boulder up that hill. Maybe that's calling, a client repeatedly. Maybe, something else. But something else puts about this sort of enlightenment, this intellectual vision, if you will, of the world's absurdity. And everyone is faced with that. But then you're offered three choices. Philosophical suicide, which I guess actually makes it two, because philosophical suicide more so... three, yeah. So one option is, stemming from philosophical suicide, is retreating to religion. So that is my criticism. It's when you say, okay, no, actually, ignoring the absurdity and just saying religion is true, and in fact the world does have meaning. Ignoring, as I said, your reason. And then the other is to material philosophical suicide, if you will, which is, gaining money, and excuse the crudeness of this, to attain as much sex, anything pleasurable. This is the intrinsic nature of life. Then it's actual suicide, to kill yourself, to notice how this entire world is awful, and to, not be able to handle it, which is, Camus says that this is actually a reasonable, rational choice, but he doesn't suggest it. And then embracing and then revolting against this absurdity that we see in life. So I guess that's my biggest criticism.
Yeah, and so when you say that there's this meaninglessness, it almost borderlines with nihilism. And I think, when you've come to that nihilistic state where there is no meaning, do you reckon absurdism gives you that sort of hope? Because when I read the myth of Sisyphus, it says that this is like a hopeless world, but it's not actually despair.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? So when you wake up every day, how does absurdism influence your life instead of someone who, a version of you which would be much more nihilistic? What's the main differences? Or what's the overall philosophy that helps you, or from absurdism that you use in your life then?
So again, I think it's worth establishing that nihilism and absurdism all start from the same sort of philosophy that life, has no meaning, intrinsic meaning, and that's also very important to clarify. But Camus is right in saying that there's no such despair, because there isn't, because you're revolting against. He says at the end of the essay, Mr. Sisyphus, that one must imagine Sisyphus to be happy. right? A nihilist would find that completely wrong, right? But he's saying, embrace the absurdity, but then revolt against it. Live as if there is a meaning almost. Find joy in the little, essences of life. The bird song and it whilst you're waiting in the queue. Create meaning almost. Whereas nihilism would it's a very baseline. It's a very tough way of living. I mean, something I really like about absurdism though is that it sort of leaves it to you. It's almost like a DIY philosophy, especially because there is also different purposes to these. I find it quite difficult typically to compare these existential philosophies because they do have other meanings and they do have other focuses. Like existentialism, that focuses more on choice and freedom. Absurdism, its main focus is pleasure and happiness. Nihilism is pretty much observing the truth. It doesn't really offer much. Or from what I've read and what I've heard, it doesn't really, offer much hope, and it doesn't really offer a way out or a way of living. God.
Triune God. There's Tawheed, Deuteronomy 6:4, Jesus Christ of Nazareth, Moses. Then you got Augustine, Athanasius. You've got
C.S. Lewis, John
Lennox. John Lennox.
Modern day ones.
Then you got the earlier saints. You got the Scholastics, Aquinas, Anselm.
Bigger beards, in other words.
Exactly, the top dogs. These individuals argued for the existence of the Christian God to some extent. There was also figures like Avicenna, and there was also great Muslim philosophers and great Jewish philosophers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Then comes the Enlightenment period, and this was really brought out, I think it was just after the Protestant Reformation, where the idea of God was much more criticized. You have figures like Darwin, you have figures like Voltaire, who in his Candide makes one as Leibniz, who says that the world that we have now is the best world that God could have created. And then, I think in the early 2000s, you had the rise of New Atheism.
Mm-hmm.
And they were brutal in its religion. They were portraying irrational as this mental illness. Dawkins says that, I believe. Things like figures like Marx, who says that religion is the opinion of the people. I think there's also another individual who's, I can't remember, I think it was something, I think his name begins with an L, who says that man created God in his image.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's Feuerbach, something like that.
Something like that.
Yes, Ludwig Feuerbach. I think that's his name.
Ludwig's definitely the first name.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And now, you've got sort of this stance between Christianity and atheism, or to make it more basic, God versus no God. But there's also a middle ground in it. There's the idea of a God, which is not necessarily the God of traditional theism. And you're an individual who believes in that. You're a deist.
Wholeheartedly.
That's the technical term for it.
The technical term.
What is your appeal for deism, and why do you reject the conventional theistic gods? What do you think is the main reason for that?
There are several reasons as to why I reject mainstream theistic religions, namely Christianity. I would say one of the biggest reasons and most significant reasons, especially in my own personal life, is the problem of divine hiddenness. I recall, in fact, relating this to you a while ago, I think. Just to elucidate that, or to give a short summary of it, God, as described in the Old and New Testament of the Bible, they want a relationship with humanity. I personally have searched for this relationship. I want a relationship with God, with the divine. In fact, there was, if I can recall, Oh, see, I want to do a good part right now.
Go for it.
Whereby, oh no, I need to start with this. Okay.
No, we can go for it.
Yeah, right, so we'll carry on from there. We'll cut that part before. Yeah. Okay, so a long time ago, there was a survey put forth by an atheistic organization that asked the question to all the participants: if there was a God, would you worship that God? To which an astonishing 85% of individuals simply said no, right? They wouldn't. They don't like this God, maybe. No. But that leaves a contingent of 15% of individuals actually replying, yes, I would. I'd like to consider myself in that small contingent. And I would definitely say if there was a relational God, I would want to worship that God. However, I have truly laid everything I had at the altar of Christ. The altar of several gods, in fact.
Yeah, you were Muslim at one point, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Like I did, in fact, wholeheartedly seek such a relationship with a God. However, my calls had been left unresponded to. My tears remained, flowing from my eyes onto the cheek with which I would laugh at the absurdity of everything I saw. And it got to the point where it came to me that it was far more likely there to be a non-relational God, a God who doesn't in fact want a relationship with me, to exist. Because and this is the deist approach. The sheer amount of arguments for God is in itself a good argument for God. I also, which kind of led me to the idea, okay, well maybe there is this intelligence. However, it wasn't just sort of, I did it before I wanted a relationship with God. I felt it, Pascal's wager, I did feel reasonable to want to believe in such a God, or a God that could save my life and give me salvation, save me from eternal torment, and more importantly, worship a God that's worthy of worship. But also, I did have a problem with the theistic gods in the sense that people do often sacrifice reason, as I mentioned previously in the other question that you gave me, the first question, I believe. People often do sacrifice their reason for comfortability. People often do say, God did this, God did that, this is God's doing, rather than say, okay, this is actually because, I like to relate to a story. I like to relate to a period rather, in, it was 1250, I believe, the Black Death, right? People didn't know about the germ theory. The scientific method was not even a consideration, but rather they wholeheartedly and holistically as a society depended on God. And therefore, and also, I guess it was, politically speaking, it was very convenient to the people at the top. So there are reasons for that. But they sacrificed their reason and just depending on God in this scenario, which was very dangerous, and it proved to be very harmful to the society. And for that reason, pretty much, I disagree, because like I said, or rather like I alluded to, it leads to this idea of the God of the gaps. We start using God as a reason to, or not as a reason, as a reason for rather certain events, which I think is intellectually lacking. Whereas deism really fits in with this scientific method, Even in itself, to become a deist, you must have to understand that, okay, you have to look around, look at evidence, a deer dies in the forest, cries, it's tortured, for what? It's very hard to look, find evidence of some sort of meaning when we know that events like this happen. Therefore, this evidence of this undeserving pain can lead one to the conclusion that an uncaring, indifferent God is the one residing in and above our world,
And that brings me on to the problem of evil. which I think is a problem that I think a lot of theists would have a hard time even trying to resolve. I mean, I think it was Augustine who said that, evil is merely a privation of good. And I think that sort of fails.
I completely disagree with that.
Yeah, same.
This is a
100%.
big point of contention with me.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to tell you a man ran down the street,
Mm-hmm.
is he doing something wrong?
No.
By running?
No.
Is he doing something good?
No.
Therefore, morally neutral actions exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the lack of good doesn't necessarily mean bad, and therefore the lack of bad doesn't necessarily mean good.
Mm-hmm.
Morally neutral acts do exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think, and I think that as well, and also the fact that, if evil is merely just an absence of good, how can evil produce itself?
Yeah, exactly.
How can a non-existent entity, something which has no ontology, sort of reproduce itself if it doesn't exist? It's just the non-existence of good. It's the opposite of existence.
Yeah, exactly.
If that makes sense. There's also been, Plantinga, and he's the main guy who I think probably got the strongest argument, in my opinion. Yeah. How do you think the deist version? I think the deist version of problem of evil is much more. It's not as big of an issue.
It's really not big of an
It's
issue.
not big of an issue.
Completely. I mean, we don't believe in this loving God. So we don't believe in this omnibenevolent God who seeks to. We don't believe in the doctrine of providence. We don't agree with this loving, kind God. We don't believe in his existence. We believe in a God that simply created and left, a God who remains alienated to this day with the society. When a mother is starved of nutrition, and so the milk that comes out of her breast and she gives to her child isn't sustaining, it doesn't care. It's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, there's no need to justify it. There's no theodicy necessary. Yeah, and I think that burden on theists is one that should pressure them almost into this intellectual defiant, exactly, right? And it should also lead them to an enlightenment of saying, this does not make sense. This does not make sense. This cannot work together in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
There's something at play here which contradicts, and I think that so I think this is why I think that it's more logical to assume the deist philosophy.
I think the main pushback that I think is not necessarily the best one, but it's more of a presuppositional sort of approach and it's built upon the transcendental argument for God. Well, it's not necessarily built upon it, but it has this sort of framework in the idea that a deist or an atheist or an agnostic, because you would consider yourself as similar to atheism, would you not? In terms
For all
of
practical purposes, yes.
Yeah. I think so. This is the argument that they provide in the idea that you can't actually have evil without without a God. In the same way that you can't have good without a God, because good and evil can't have ontology if there doesn't exist a God. And so when someone says that the existence of evil disproves God, how do you know that's evil? How can you register that evil? And the main argument that a lot of Christian apologists nowadays state is that to state that something is evil, there has to be some way that you can ground your ideas of evil within. And these are transcendence. And the argument is that the only way to ground your idea of logic,
an idea of perfect, which is God. Yeah.
Exactly, is God.
The argument for degrees in Aquinas is cognological arguments.
Yeah.
Almost.
Mm-hmm.
The argument for degrees. So this kind of links in back with my absurdist approach of live as if there is one.
Mm-hmm.
We must not kid ourselves by thinking there is a set God, because there's no meaning Well, it's not even whether good and bad really exist, to be honest. It's whether they have any importance. As I said previously, people do what is convenient and then repent. I do think that is really true, and I guess I could. Alluding back to C.S. Lewis, I feel like that is very important. You know, he's an incredible, like, I concede even as a deist that he is an incredible ethical theorist, if you will. And he alludes to a young man walking down a road beside a body of water, and he hears a cry from a woman, and he runs along to see her. Now then, he has two instincts. One instinct is to save. This is the herd instinct. The other is to run away. This is the self-preservation instinct. Now, I believe that what is good is what is given to us the reason which is being given by God. So we are one with reason. Our soul, our mind, all of it unites under reason. If it is reasonable for us to do something, this is where I diverge a lot from the typical deist community.
Oh, okay.
Because this is where I say, okay, reason decides morality. A lot of people wouldn't say that. If it be reasonable to go and jump in and save the woman in that scenario, meaning if there was a good chance of us getting out, both of us getting out, rather than me just pursuing, to do that, then it could be viewed as good. But even so, I guess there's this, that is what I would personally view as good. But are you talking about an objective, intrinsic, because I guess everything boils down to this intrinsic nature of stuff, Is there intrinsic meaning? Is there intrinsic good? I would negate there being both, but I would say there could be a socially reasonably given good, if that makes sense.
So you say that reason and good are grounded in this theistic God.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because that's like a very sort of theistic answer for a...
Somewhat.
Yeah.
But then again, the traditional theistic recognition of good is typically coinciding with walking with the nature of God.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this isn't.
Mm-hmm.
This really is not that. It's alienation from God.
Mm-hmm. So why be deists and not atheists? Because for all practical purposes, you said that deism and atheism are practically very much the same in their approach. You wouldn't believe in an afterlife, would you?
No.
You wouldn't believe in the idea that you have a soul.
Well, I guess that all depends on the definition of what is a soul.
Oh, okay. And would you say that like that's a problem that's specifically for you, or for like the atheists as well?
I would say it isn't a problem. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a problem. I'd say it's rather pedantic to an atheist, in fact, actually.
Mm-hmm. I think an atheist would scorn at the idea that we have a soul.
Yeah.
I think for a deist, it's much more,
It's much more nuanced.
It's a nuanced idea. Yeah,
yeah exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally believe that the soul and the mind unify and create some sort of, almost this one nature, binded through reason. I think reason is the essence of everything. That's beyond material. I think nothing we do can stem out of rationality at its core. From our emotions that may seem dysregulated or poor at some time or at any given moment. Even at that core, it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think reason comes from then?
God.
So God. Yeah. So how does so I think my original question was, how do you think, so you want to advocate for deism, would you say that it's better than atheism in any way? Or what is the sort of appeal?
Practically it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I would say intellectually it is.
Mm-hmm.
Atheism, I would say is to be an atheist is to be irrational.
Really?
Yeah, intellectually irrational. Like, there are so many arguments for God that in itself is an argument for God. But yeah, the sheer amount, like a lot of these arguments countering the existence of God,
Mm-hmm.
or the belief in the existence of God rather, are
Mhm.
actually just like sociologically and like I believe when examining the truth, one must abandon every other factor stopping you from believing that.
Mm-hmm.
Or that doesn't sound that sounds irrational. Like counting only other factors that might seem like to believe in it is not good.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the fact that it's maybe irrational. Like if I was to tell you, don't believe in God because don't believe in God because there's this sociological bad products, right?
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be rational. Then not believe in God because to believe in God would mean there would be bad sociological impact. I believe when searching for the truth, you must wholeheartedly look for it. You shouldn't be swayed by any of this kind of thing. But like, if you look at a lot of the counter arguments against God, it is actually sociological. Like, I was listening to a debate the other day, and it mentioned that 7% of all wars are fought in the name of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to a lot of people, including myself, actually, on first, listening to that. It's a relatively small amount of wars of wars caused by that, considering the 93 other percent, contingent, right? But then the 7% of those wars are fought in the name of God, whereas the 93% aren't fought in the name of atheism. So
Mm-hmm.
there is sociological down
Mm-hmm.
side. However, this is not a place upon which one can shoot insulted truth from, because you can't negate truth or validity of a truth based on another thing that is kind of irrelevant or is irrelevant.
What do you mean by that, sorry?
So, in essence, the sociological impacts don't negate truth.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of people stand firm on the fact that, because this has negative sociological impacts, therefore it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like a lot of arguments, it's like that, right?
Mm-hmm. I think, Christianity...
like, if I was to say to you, Christianity is wrong because of the KKK, I mean, there is I guess, a point of contention where it says, like, when you become Christian, you then bear the fruits of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Of the spirit, right? The peace, patience, gentleness, self-control, etc., etc. So there is that, but that can only work to some extent. Because then you could just say, actually, to be fair, well, these people aren't Christian. But like at the end of the day, you have to really look at from it. And there's so many arguments to prove God's existence.
Mm-hmm.
Like I keep on referring back to that. There are so many that I think that's an argument in itself.
Mm-hmm. So let's look at these arguments for God then, because I think it's one point saying how good they are, and it's another point just critiquing them. Looking at them.
I know. I look
Scrutiny, absolute scrutiny. I think the top tier arguments, in my opinion, from Aquinas, I think his cosmological arguments are really good.
Really?
I think, he's obviously got 5 ways.
Yeah.
I think one of his ways is the actus purus argument for God, which is, when you look at the critiques, it's not the best argument, but it's the one that's like stood the test of time in my opinion. It's the idea that everything in the world has the potentiality to change. As it changes, the the actualization of potentiality. So if you were to walk over there, you could potentially walk, or if you were to, you could potentially do something.
Yeah.
And so because of that, this form of change, there has to be something that's changeless, and that has to be God. And God is actus purus, he's pure act, he's pure actuality.
Unless there's an infinite regress.
Yeah.
Why are you assuming that there couldn't be an infinite regress then?
And that's the thing. I think, first of all, it doesn't necessarily stall infinite regress, and I think that's why the cosmological argument is, in my opinion, faulty. And I think this is where Kant comes in again, because Kant says that once you get to this point of, okay, you've got as far back as the universe, now it's either a coin flip to determine whether or not that's God. I think with a lot of these arguments, that's what it comes to. It's a matter of coin flip. You have the evidence, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a God. It's not a proof. It's not logically proved. It's an inductive argument.
Yeah.
It's just stating the probability that there's a God. And I think that's where a lot of arguments for God collapses, because I think, there's one thing to say that there's strong arguments for God, but I think a lot of them aren't proofs of God. And I think for a lot of people to understand the existence of God, there has to be a proof. And the only way in which I've seen the best proofs for God is through personal experience, but I don't think that's trustworthy because that's anecdotal.
Do you doubt the validity of anecdotal experience? Like I say, intellectual visions, what's it called? Corporeal visions.
Yes, corporeal visions. So obviously I grew up as a Catholic.
Yeah.
And I said I grew up in a Pentecostal church when I was younger. I think, when people say to me that, they were speaking, I don't believe you can, I think speaking in tongues is a tricky, sort of topic, because many people adamantly believe in the idea that you can speak in the language of the Holy Spirit, which is this gibberish.
Yeah.
My pastor said I could speak in tongues, something like that. And people state that they can do, even though scientifically, or not scientifically, sorry, people have done in research, social factors, they've seen that, the technical term for speaking in tongues in the gibberish form is called glossolalia.
Yeah.
They've gone to try to also speak in these tongues, and it's the same thing, the exact same thing. As it sounds the exact same, it's the same sort of procedure, and it's that's a lot of people who genuinely believe that that's a religious experience.
But could you not argue that they are all achieving some sort of experience with the divine, just in the same form, but recognize the God to be different?
I don't think so, because I think that's more like a pluralism. I mean, not necessarily pluralism in the sense that there's only one God and there's only one way to get to heaven, but you're experiencing God differently. I think, then you can extend that argument out to and I think to some extent, I think the Catholic Church states that, when Muslims pray to God, they're praying to the same God as Christians. They don't understand that God is a triune God, as in they're praying to the essence of God, but they're not praying to actual, triune God himself.
Exactly, right? Exactly.
Yeah. That's an interesting point that you've come across there. I think when people have religious experiences of God, it's why isn't God showing them the true way then? If that makes sense.
Well, exactly.
And I think then that...
Why, of course.
Exactly. Why would they receive religious revelation, but they're receiving it further away from the truth?
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. And I think that would disprove these sorts of religious experiences. And I think, I'm not saying this is all religious experience.
Would they disprove religious experience? Or would they disprove the existence of a certain type of God? The God that they are worshipping or means to have an experience with. Mm-hmm. You could say that, why did God give me reason? Mm-hmm. If that reason is going to lead me to become a deist. Exactly. If he doesn't want a relationship with me.
Mm-hmm. And the same way, reason can be used to kill someone.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. We are bound to be reasonable, because that is our... Oh, so close to saying purpose then.
It's our nature.
That's our nature, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't always mean that which is divine is bound by a similar chain. It's an assumption, almost it said we created God.
Yeah. In our
Nietzsche, I believe, actually said something like that. He said,
God is dead.
God is dead.
Yeah, and we killed him.
Yeah, God is dead and we killed him.
I can pull the exact quote up right here. It's in this book as well.
In this book.
This is the first time Nietzsche actually
look at this fantastic book. Alright, guys, we're both going to present books that we suggest you should read.
Absolutely. I think it's Aphorism 108, I believe.
Speaking of which, we do our suggestions.
Yeah, we should do that, yeah. So I think his actual quote was, God is dead, but given the ways of men, perhaps for millennia to come, there will be caves in which his shadow will be shown, and we still have to subdue his shadow. That was the first time God was mentioned as dead. And I think that is one of the most important statements of the 19th
Definitely the
century.
most like profound.
Mm-hmm.
Whilst we're on the topic of books, in fact, Tim and I thought it'd be a fantastic idea. In fact, actually, it was all Tim's idea. Right? I shouldn't be saying credit for that. It was not me at all. Tim is the guy. That we should present 5 books that you guys should read to keep informed and this kind of stuff, so you can thoroughly enjoy that which we relate to.
Yes.
Exactly. So, I love philosophy. Tim loves philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
My niche is, or what I'm really interested in, what I specialize in is existentialism. And my own philosophy is, as mentioned before, absurdism. And now the essay that really delves into it and really elucidates it in such a way that is clear, that is beautifully articulated, is in this book, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. That's one of them.
Mm-hmm.
What's your first one?
I'd say I'm more of a literary sort of individual. I like poetry, I like classics, I like anything to do with religion. I'm more of a theology sort of individual. Even though I love philosophy, I do prioritize reading the works of Aquinas, reading the works of the Church Fathers, and doing all those, or reading all those sorts of books. And I think I've got the book over there. If our cameraman can just give it over here, the Ante-Nicene Fathers. And so these were, I think, the Church Fathers, especially if you want to get into religious philosophy. I think the Church Fathers, especially the earlier ones, can give you a taste of Christianity. I think there's a lot of material on them, and there's a lot of criticism, because there's a lot of critique. Maybe these were plagiarized texts, or maybe these were texts that were inherently, manipulated with. I think, to read this and to see Christian history thoroughly and detailed, and see how these saints sort of lived, like the early church, how it was, and these figures, I think that's really important. And so I think that's my main sort of request for people. If you are interested in theology, if you want to know more about the faith, I think a lot of our viewers will be somewhat religious. I think the majority may as well be Christian. I think that's the main demographic that I think I am involved in right now. I think it's very important that we read this. I was wondering, do you want to do some books on a separate video, and just when you're at home?
Oh,
we can do it then.
Yeah, sure, sure.
We'll do that then. But for now, I think these 2 books are like
those 2 books
really
for this particular episode.
Yeah,
I think this is quite useful.
I think for this particular episode, for God, I think understanding the metaphysics of the existence, and I think because what we talked about was philosophy,